Photographs throughout history have been able to change nations to surpass social injustices implemented throughout society for centuries. As Dorothea Lange once said, while there is perhaps a province in which the photograph can tell us nothing more than what we see with our own eyes, there is another in which it proves to us how little our eyes permit us to see. Photographers like Jacob Riis, Lewis Hine, and Carol Gallagher were able to speak out against many social injustices in the absence of mandatory rights throughout American history. Their stories illustrate the effects of photography on society's point of view and its effects on the United States. Photographs taken by these influential characters comment on issues society has become desensitized to or that it has become oblivious to overall. Their pivotal work reflects cooperation during a period of great conflict between the different social classes and the lack of civil rights. The three photographers are able to bring out the truth and convey it to society through their photographs.
Jacob Riis was born in Ribe, Denmark in 1849. In 1870, he arrived in the United States and worked as a carpenter. After learning English, Riis worked his way up through smaller newspapers and secured a job as a reporter. In 1877, Riis switched jobs again to work as a crime reporter and a photographer for the New York Tribune. By 1888, he was a reporter for the New York Evening Sun. Acting as a war correspondent, Riis was the first major documentary photographer in America. He was able to use his camera to expose the terrible living conditions of the immigrants in one of the most crowded places in the world, the Lower East Side of New York City. People lived in very tight spaces, with many families living in a single room. He eventually made his mark by covering police news, taking photographs, and creating his book, How the Other Half Lives. Jacob Riis created his best-known work, How the Other Half Lives, in 1890. This book was one of the earliest and most popular social documentary books in America. Because of its content, many magazines refused to print his work. In How the Other Half Lives, Riis photographed the areas of the city that high-class citizens had no desire to see firsthand. Jacob Riis wanted to show the wealthy something they had never seen before. He was able to demonstrate that there was another reality, and that prosperity did not go the whole way to the lower classes. By working with various progressive groups, Riis was able to create more of a sympathetic attitude towards immigrants. He raised public awareness on social issues, exposed corruption and exploitation, which led to social and political changes in the United States. Within the photos and the text of How the Other Half Lives, Riis exposed the living conditions of many places. When the flash gun was invented, it allowed him to take his equipment into the tenement rooms with no windows and no access to natural light or fresh air. The first photograph Riis took in this situation shocked millions of people and exposed the hell of tenements. Jacob Riis published his photographs in his book that ended up selling more than 28 million copies. Within the next 2 decades, the worst tenements were shut down, while landlords were forced to install toilets inside homes, not outside. Riis battled against the slums until they disappeared in 1905. Eventually, Jacob Riis died in 1914, but the photos he documented will live on forever to bear witness of the dark past and will remain in many people's memories.
Riis's pioneering of documentary photography and his national prominence helped pave the way for the photography of Lewis Hine. Hine was born on September 26, 1874 in Wisconsin. Hine learned responsibility and hard work from a young age after his father passed away during his teen years. At age 25, Hine entered into higher education and graduated from the University of Chicago with a bachelor's degree in education. In 1901, Hine made a move from rural Wisconsin to New York City. Hine would later return to his hometown in 1904 to marry his wife, Sarah Ann Rich. In New York City, Hine received his master's degree in education at New York University. But Hine initially made his move in 1901 to work at the Ethnoculture School as a geography and nature study teacher. The vocational school was known for its progressive teaching methods and its strong belief that every person was uniquely precious and irreplaceable. Hine was assigned and persuaded by Frank Manny, the superintendent of the Ethnoculture School, to create a club to teach others the art of photography in order to help students focus their attention and develop discipline. Marking the very starting point of Hine's renowned photographic career, Frank Manny suggested in 1904 that Hine should photo-document immigrants arriving at Ellis Island. With this assignment, Hine hoped to create a human connection that allows viewers to transcend the ethnic and class differences between newcomers and settled American citizens. The photos hope to reject the fear of immigrants and illustrate to viewers that new arrivals were strong future citizens who would infuse the melting pot with energy and vitality and who would be 100% American. Hine used his 50-pound 5x7 view camera to capture 200 photographs of immigrants stepping into a new life and the land of the free. These pictures mark the beginning of a photographic career built around a depiction of humanity and the dignity of workers and the working class. In 1908, Hine left his teaching position and accepted a full-time job offered by the National Child Labor Committee as an investigative photographer and campaigned to outlaw child labor and rescue the 2 million children under 16 years of age working during this time. The National Child Labor Committee was an organization founded in 1904 made up of men and women who believed that a healthy, normal childhood was the rightful heritage of all children. The committee demanded an 8-hour day, no night work, and mandatory work permits based on documentary proof of age, as well as a ban of employment of children 14 in most occupations and under 16 in dangerous trades. Traveling 50,000 miles across the country, Hine photographed every sector of the economy that employed young children in conditions unfit for human life. Hine visited cotton, mining, and canning mills, as well as agricultural jobs and other street jobs. Hine's entrance into workplaces was very challenging. In each picture, Hine attempted to capture the children's humanity, dignity, and strength. Facing hostile employees and factory police trying to stop Hine's project of revealing the truth forced Hine to obtain information surreptitiously. In some cases, Hine was forced to enter in disguise as a fire inspector and insurance salesman, inspecting the machinery. Before each photo, Hine would talk to the children, learn their ages and work histories, and would then present this information in the captions, lectures, and poster displays accompanying the photos. In cases in which Hine was unable to enter the workplace, Hine would wait for young workers outside until they finished their shifts. In this example, Hine awaited 34 young boys at ages 9 to 14 outside a cotton mill in Georgia. After working for the National Child Labor Committee for 10 years capturing children in the unjust working conditions around the country, Hine's campaign was met with remarkable success. People all over the country saw Hine's photographs in newspapers and magazines and in steady publications set out by the National Child Labor Committee. Here a newspaper announces advancements in dangerous glass factories that have canceled night shifts for young boys. In 1912, the United States Children's Bureau was created, and improvements were made in state laws regulating child labor. In 1916, a federal child labor law was passed. During the 1910s, the total number of working children was cut in half, and the total percentage of the population engaged in child labor from 1900 to 1920 had dropped from 19% to under 9%. A newspaper reporter who saw an exhibit of Hine's photos at a conference in Birmingham, Alabama, was stunned by the power of these images. He wrote, "There has been no more convincing proof of the absolute necessity of child labor laws than these pictures showing the suffering, the degradation, the immoral influence, the utter lack of anything that is wholesome in the lives of these poor little wage earners. They speak far more eloquently than any written work. Terrible to encounter, terrible to admit that such things exist in civilized communities." Hine's images of working children stirred America's conscience and helped change the nation's laws. The change helped minimize the future illiteracy, poverty, and continuing misery promised by child labor. Ultimately, Hine's photos awakened the people who became desensitized to the situation as a whole. To many, uneducated children who would continue to be no more than moneymakers was a part of life that was unchangeable. But with photography, with the cooperation of Hine to the constant lack of safety and rights, the voice of those that could not be heard was finally heard and responded to. Hine's work with photography continued, and in 1918, Hine accepted an assignment from the American Red Cross to travel overseas for several months to the ruined lands of war-torn Europe. He was to photograph refugees and relief efforts in the aftermath of World War I. During the 1920s and 1930s, Hine made a series of work portraits, which emphasized the human contribution to modern industry and showed that workers were the real heroes of society. In 1930, at age 55, Hine began the most daring assignment of his career. He was hired to photograph the step-to-step construction of what would be the world's tallest building, the Empire State Building in New York City. As Hine once said, "The picture is a symbol that brings one immediately so close into touch with reality. The picture is a language of all nationalities and all ages." With his photographs, Hine was able to bring people back into reality and awakening them to the real lives children should be living and enjoying.
Carol Gallagher was born in 1950 and grew up in New York during the Cold War era. At the beginning of 1982, she decided to start a career in journalism. In 1983, she moved to St. George, Utah to document some of the effects of nuclear testing. The people she interviewed were all affected by the testing that took place at the Nevada test site. The Nevada test site is located in the Nevada desert. Over 928 nuclear weapons were tested. In 1993, the explosions were stopped. Today, there are still areas of the testing location that are hot due to the test. Tours of the area are also offered. According to Gallagher, tour guides do not tell the whole story about the test site. The truth about fallout was hidden from the public. They were told that it was harmless and had no connection to cancer or any other illness. In Carol Gallagher's book, she tells the stories of workers at the test site, soldiers who were used to test the effects of radiation, and downwinders. Carol Gallagher interviewed Keith Prescott, who worked at the test site from 1961 to 1968. His job was to go in after a bomb was set off and collect all of the interior bedrock with a mucking machine. While working at the test site, Prescott developed multiple myeloma, a type of cancer that starts in the bone marrow. While working one day, Prescott leaned over a railing to retrieve a flashlight and shattered all of the bones in his chest. When Gallagher asked Prescott about the environment at the test site, Prescott responded, "The people at the test site were of the attitude, don't make any waves, don't come in and complain. That makes you feel bad because you knew something was wrong with you and nobody believed you." Robert Marin was also interviewed by Gallagher. Marin went to the test site as a soldier. Before arriving, Marin was put in a training course. He remembers that no one knew what the results of the test would be even after the training. He was stationed in a trench 3,500 yards away from the site of an explosion. When he got out of the trench after the explosion, the landscape was bare. Years later, Marin had to have several parts of his intestines removed due to cancer. He also had a fused disc in his back. Marin believes that the psychological damage caused by being subjected to the test is much worse. Isaac Nelson lived downwind of the test site. Nelson recalls that when testing started in Nevada, people were excited. Many people, including him and his wife Aletta, drove out to see the first test. Later that day, pinkish tan fallout clouds drifted over nearby towns, and people went outside to watch them pass. In 1955, one of these clouds drifted over the city that Aletta and Isaac lived in. They went outside to watch it pass, but when they came back inside, Aletta was bright red and suffered from a severe headache and nausea. 4 weeks after seeing the cloud, Aletta lost most of her hair and it never grew back. She continued to get weaker until a doctor found a brain tumor. They were not able to remove all of it, and in 1965, Aletta died at age 41. Carol Gallagher recorded these stories and captured the faces of victims with the purpose of warning others. She photographed the many witnesses to the testing's effects and documented the injustices these people experienced at the hands of their own government. In one of her interviews, Gallagher remarked, "People need to be vigilant. People need to attend to their own health and the general needs in health care for the country and the world. The biggest thing, I think, is not to give in to the paralysis, the feeling that you can't make a difference. So if people read this book and they get depressed, what I hope they know by the end is that there is some hope if you're active, but there's no hope if you're passive. It's the passivity that is killing the ideas of this country."
Jacob Riis, Lewis Hine, and Carol Gallagher all epitomize the impact photography could have on the world. These three influential individuals were able to show that conformity to the norms of society was not the only choice. Despite their conflicting views with those in control, these photographers awakened the public to the social injustices they were enduring and showed that these hardships could quickly disappear. Riis, Hine, and Gallagher's photos created a voice for those who were simply disregarded and changed the life they were bound to live forever.